The police in the patrol car were told that a girl was in danger in a nearby alley. The officer thanked the woman for the information she provided and assured her that they would look into it. The girl nodded her head in satisfaction and walked away from the police car. The officer behind the wheel breathed a sigh of relief and looked at his partner. He asked her, "So their working day was over?" However, the policewoman, pointing to a group of young people in the alley, asked if these were the people the woman had spoken to them about, and if she thought they should hurry there. The officer asked his partner with displeasure why they needed this. Didn't she see their leader? There are too many of them and they can't do anything together. Then the girl suggested calling for backup, to which the officer replied that these people would just play with the girl and then leave her alone and that she had nothing to worry about. This is not the first time this has happened, and there is no need to create unnecessary problems. Suddenly, the police clearly heard someone's footsteps and a voice demanding that the hooligans let the girl go. It was an unknown policeman who stood up for the girl. The leader looked at him in bewilderment and asked what he wanted. The young policeman firmly ordered the girl to be released. Struck by such impudence, the leader slowly walked towards the lone policeman. He unceremoniously blew a stream of cigarette smoke into his face and asked what he would do to him if he didn't want to leave the girl. The policeman struck the insolent man in the jaw with lightning speed. His eyes rolled back and blood spurted in all directions. The cigarette fell out of his mouth and, hissing, landed on the asphalt. The leader, covering his face with his hands, howled loudly, and the policeman stood calmly and looked at him. What happened shocked not only the patrolman in the car, but also the bandits themselves, who were speechless for a moment. And the young policeman, turning to the leader, said that since he did not want to leave the girl alone, he would have to suffer. The bandit rose with difficulty and knelt down, looking at the policeman with hatred. Then, with the last of his strength, he threw himself at him with his fists. However, he immediately received a counterpunch right in the nose. The powerful blow sent the leader flying several meters away. The young policeman was collected and did not lose his vigilance. The police officers in the patrol car watched his actions in amazement. He stood over his fallen opponent, rubbing his bruised arm. The leader reached into his bosom with his bloody hand. He pulled out a knife and told the policeman that he intended to kill him. The stranger calmly asked him if he had ever killed before. The leader exclaimed that he had already killed more than once. And now the policeman would be next. But the young man calmly replied that he was lying. Approaching the bandit, the law enforcement officer confidently stated that he had never killed a person, because his gaze did not resemble the gaze of someone who had committed murder. The leader, gritting his teeth, asked him if he really thought he didn't have the strength to kill him. The policeman told the bandit to kill him then. After this, he grabbed the leader's hand with force and put the knife in his hand to his chest. The cop looked the bandit in the eye with a scary look and said that if he couldn't kill him, then everything would be different. The leader recoiled in fear. The young policeman repeated that if he couldn't kill him, then he would kill the bandit. The bandit realized that this guy was not lying. The knife fell from the leader's hand and landed with a clang on the sidewalk. He asked the policeman, trembling, who he was anyway. The cop grabbed him by the shoulder and squeezed his fingers until they hurt. He replied that he was the one who caught scum like him. The leader screamed desperately in pain. And a week ago, some events took place in the port of Incheon. A man approached one of the containers, which were located here in large numbers. He resolutely grabbed the door handles, throwing the doors open. A large group of criminal-looking people were waiting for him inside. The man who entered was a notorious assassin nicknamed Bright December, who muttered that everyone seemed to be assembled. The red-haired killer nicknamed October asked his colleague why he came so late. He got involved in this matter because it was his last mission, to which Bright December replied that he was exaggerating and that he had not come that late. Bright December asked, "What is this?" October, narrowing his eyes, replied that the Bodhisattva had asked to work with him. That hour, behind Bright December, a man appeared with a chain in his hands. He skillfully threw it around the victim's neck. Bright December, however, managed to put his hand out, thus not giving the opportunity to strangle himself. He used a clever move to snatch the chain from the killer and knocked him out. Jingling his chain, Bright December asked October what this meant. He shrugged his shoulders indifferently and replied that it was just his job. It's called a mission to eliminate the legendary killer Bright December. After that, the whole gang rushed at him. Bright December defended itself from knife-wielding bandits with a stolen chain. He eliminated one by strangling the guy with her help. Another criminal attacked Bright December with an axe. He barely managed to dodge the treacherous blow. The sharp blade passed just a few centimeters from his head. However, Bright December managed to disarm the bandit and knock him out with a kick to the head. Some of the bandits were out of action and lay bleeding at the bottom of the container, while others tried unsuccessfully to get Bright December. Bright December wrapped a chain around the neck of one of the thugs and strangled him with difficulty. He fell down dead, wheezing and spurting blood. Bright December acted decisively and ruthlessly, dealing with the entire gang. October glared at his competitor. Bright December, meanwhile, killed the last bandit and turned its face to October. He asked if he had gathered such a pack to kill him. October cursed foully and reached under his clothes. October pointed a gun at Bright December's face and said that he, of course, did not have much respect for guns, but now he had no other choice. October admitted that it was the Bodhisattva's order. He needed to get rid of the unsuitable ones, and he uses the gun when he doesn't feel like bothering with cleaning. Bright December realized that the Bodhisattva himself had ordered his death. But he promised that this would be his last mission, and after that, everything would end. October grinned nastily and advised Bright December to ask him in hell why he did that. October's finger on the trigger of the pistol tensed, and he said goodbye to Bright December. At the last moment, Bright December desperately rushed at October. The splattered blood left an unsightly stain on the wall of the container. The sour-smelling smoke of burnt gunpowder hung inside. The Bodhisattva prayed in the temple, looking at the gilded figure of Buddha. His gaze was drawn to a small icon located next to the burning candles. He was distracted from his prayer by a telephone call. The Bodhisattva put the phone to his ear and was informed that everything was done. Something in the caller's voice alerted the old man. At this time, on the floor of the container from where the phone call came, October was lying in a pool of blood with a bullet in his head. Bright December said into the phone, addressing the Bodhisattva, that he was a real piece of shit. The old man finally recognized Bright December's voice and was very surprised. He said into the receiver that he was just about to light 49 incense sticks. But how did he learn about this ancient ritual and call him? And the subscriber asked the old man if he was in the temple now. The Bodhisattva replied that the monk should be in the temple. Then he told Bright December that he would never be able to go up to his temple because it was reliably protected. The murderer replied that the monk should already go and open the door because he was behind it. Bright December told him that he was already on his way. If the Bodhisattva does not come out, he will open the door himself. He told the old man that they would talk when he smashed his skull. The road to Bright December was blocked by a whole gang guarding the monk, and the tall Hulk informed him that the Bodhisattva was currently preparing for the ceremony and was not receiving anyone. Bright December told him to go to hell and said that this man was stealing children and turning them into murderers. And how could someone who made money from murder be called a deity? The guard couldn't believe his ears and stared at the killer with wide eyes. He clenched his hand convulsively around the handle of his battle axe. Then he made a wide swing, aiming to hit Bright December on the head. However, he deftly dodged and knocked the big guy down with a blow to the groin. He told the gang members to move over because he had been trained to kill since childhood. He gave up everything for this. Bright December dealt with the bandits like a man possessed, shouting that he had given up himself for the sake of murder. He also gave up his usual life. He even abandoned his family. Bright December broke through the crowd of bandits, receiving serious wounds. He even received a deep stab in the back with a knife. But he still wanted, at all costs, to get through to the man who deceived him. Behind him there was a pile of dead people. However, at the end of this journey, the cold barrel of a pointed pistol touched his head. The Bodhisattva wanted to take his life. Bright December saw this vile face before itself. He told the old man that he had promised to let him live a normal life. That after this last mission he promised that he would be able to live like a normal person. He even swore to him about it. The Bodhisattva stated that he was now living an ordinary life. The old man leaned towards Bright December and whispered that every ordinary person sooner or later faces death. Selecting the free play of the trigger with his finger, he said that such are the laws of life. Bright December felt that a shot was about to be fired. The monk wished for Bright December to return to Buddha after death and pulled the trigger. Lying in a pool of his own blood, Bright December whispered that he would still take revenge. He will take revenge even from the depths of hell. He was brought out of the darkness by someone's voice, asking him to wake up. Bright December saw a policeman in front of him, who looked at him with concern. Lying in bed, he thought sadly that he had been caught by the police, and one of them said that, according to the doctor, he might have short-term memory loss. The police girl called him by his name Kim and asked him to come to his senses, and Bright December asked her, "Who is Kim?" The cops showed him his photo ID and told him to look in the mirror. He was listed as a police officer from the Ilsen station named Kim. His photo even hung on the honor board. In the photograph, he was undoubtedly wearing the uniform of a police officer. It was incredible. The legendary killer Bright December became a policeman. He compared his photo on his ID card with the image in the mirror in bewilderment. Bright December woke up after death. He became a policeman. The legendary assassin Bright December was reborn after being betrayed by his organization. He was reborn as a policeman. But instead of taking revenge, he only got punched in the face. Two of his colleagues thought Kim was a moron. They themselves mocked their fellow soldiers, and the following happened. Kim did something. He attempted to commit suicide. Now he was sitting on the hospital bed and looking in the mirror. And the policewoman was telling him that no matter how hard it was for him, he couldn't do that. He was lucky that the rope had broken, and he had been unconscious for a whole week. She was very agitated and scolded him. The girl leaned towards Kim's face and asked if he really thought he could change anything by writing down the names of these scumbags. Kim couldn't understand what the policewoman was talking about, and she explained that she was talking about his suicide note, in which he left the names of his senior officers, accusing them of abuse of office. They were Senior Patrolman Min and Chan. Jong constantly reminded Kim that his parents were criminals who committed suicide after what they did. He accused him of deciding to follow them, and Min was perplexed as to how the son of a criminal became an officer. Afterwards, Chan told him that if he was going to say goodbye to life, he should have done it in silence. Min asked why he wrote their names at all. Jong made a wide swing to hit Kim. However, he did not succeed. Chan opened his eyes wide in surprise. Kim grabbed his hand firmly and the senior patrolman asked Kim if he was crazy. How dare he resist him? Min turned to the kneeling policewoman named Chu. He asked her if Kim's actions could be considered an attempt to kill a superior, but the girl replied that she did not see anything. Min asked mockingly, "Can't she see anything?" He leaned down and grabbed the girl by the hair, declaring that for his sake she could stand up. At this time, Kim appeared behind Min. He asked the police what kind of mess they had made here. That's when Min wanted to hit Kim, but Kim intercepted his hand. Kim squeezed his wrist with such force that the senior patrolman screamed loudly in pain. He rolled his eyes and bent his knees because the pain was simply unbearable. The police officers who were being bullied by Min and Chan looked on in surprise at this action. Min desperately begged Kim to let go of his hand, but the policeman only squeezed his hand tighter, and then with 2 fingers he struck Min in the neck. His eyes rolled back. He fell to the ground unconscious, dropping his uniform cap. Chong asked his brother in confusion what had happened to him, and Kim treated Senior Patrolman Jong to a kick. The toe of the boot hit Young right in the groin. The senior patrolman's eyes began to fill with tears from the painful blow. He screamed, and foam came out of his wide-open mouth. Both rapists were now lying on the ground, groaning, and the policeman they had just humiliated looked at Kim with fear and respect. Chu pointed her finger at him and whispered that he was the real killer. Kim looked at the girl with regret and said nothing. Senior Officer Ha called all police officers to a meeting. He wanted to understand what had happened and asked Kim why he raised his hand against his colleague and even hit his senior. Apparently, he thought the officer couldn't be fired. Ha promised to personally handle the matter of Kim's dismissal and ordered him to get out. Kim went outside and sat down on a bench in the gazebo and thought about how these pigs were a real pile of shit. He stared blankly at one point and thought, after everything that happened, Chu approached him. She asked him if he was crazy, to which Kim replied that it was just self-defense. Another policeman who had been humiliated by the Min and Jong brothers reminded Kim that these people were being protected by a senior general. To Kim's surprised look, he added that this general had a whole mugunghwa flower. After this, the humiliated trio said goodbye to Kim and advised him to be careful on the way home. Kim leaned against the back of the bench and realized why the police couldn't catch them. They were all rotten from the inside. Their boss has a whole mugunghwa, which is like 1 star in the army. Kim thought that it would be better if he were reborn in the body of a pig than as someone of higher rank, although he was still a loser all along. Kim took off his uniform cap and looked at the cockade. He whispered that at least he was not a senior general. Kim remembered how, as a little boy, he stood in the rain and saw a man offer him his hand. It was a bald monk who invited him to go with him. Then Kim didn't think long. Then he began to grow up. He began to grow up with a group of similarly brainwashed children. He soon turned into a real killer. And then there was the bodhisattva monk with a pistol in his hand. Then came the shot that freed him from life. After that, a rope loop. A failed police officer decides to commit suicide. Fortunately, it ended in failure. This police officer Kim was abandoned by his parents. He felt betrayed by the team and wanted to commit suicide. Kim looked at the photo of the man whose body he was currently in and thought that he was now in a similar situation. It even seemed to him that he wanted to repeat his fate. The Gyeonggi-do West Police Station building was brightly lit inside and out. In a spacious office sat a man with gilded shoulder straps on his jacket. It was Senior General Hong Jong who was reviewing the closed files. Suddenly, the general heard a quiet voice behind him, which told him that they had not seen each other for a long time. A stranger in dark clothes with a hood asked the general how he had been doing all this time. Zhang asked him what was the matter and what he wanted. The man held a sharp pencil to the general's neck and said that they needed to talk. Zhang asked who he was, and the stranger replied that he was Bright December. The man called Bright December continued to stand behind the general, who sat in a chair in front of his desk. After some time, having listened to Bright December's story and already sitting on the soft sofa, General Zhang said incredulously that everything the young man had told him was nonsense. It is impossible to believe that he is Bright December, who was killed and then reincarnated in the body of an officer. No one will believe such nonsense. Bright December replied that he was not asking to be believed. It's just a threat. The general looked into Bright December's eyes searchingly. The guy turned to the general with a serious expression on his face. He claimed that he could help him get rid of the Huaguksa temple. Zhang looked at Bright December with distrust. He didn't look like a madman. The general asked the stranger with concern who he really was. He asked in surprise, didn't he introduce himself to the general? And Zhang quietly took a walkie-talkie out of the desk drawer. I don't believe that this man is Bright December. He told the stranger that he didn't think it was right to discuss the Huaguksa temple here, and in the meantime he pressed the button to call for backup. However, nothing happened. An acrid smoke began to pour out of the radio. Bright December turned to the senior general again. He reminded him of what he had said just recently. He doesn't ask him for a favor. He walked through the corridors of this police station, filled with guards, and worked. Getting to the senior general's office was not very easy. He's not asking for a favor, he's threatening. Senior General Zhang rose from his seat and stared incredulously at the strange visitor. He asked the young man again who he was, and the man patiently replied that he was Bright December. The general indignantly leaned his hands on the table and asked the guy to stop this nonsense. But Bright December began his story in a calm voice. Bright December reminded the general that 3 years ago he had promised him something. At that time, Zhang, still the chief of police, sat wounded near a garbage bin in a back alley. It was raining heavily, and the man under the umbrella asked him if he was Police Chief Hong Jun. The masked man introduced himself as Bright December. Zhang asked incredulously if he was really from the Huaguksa temple, and Bright December in turn asked Zhang if he had been chasing the monk for quite some time. He stated that Zhang was the first person to get so close to him, and the monk asked him to convey his congratulations. Bright December pressed a secret button on the umbrella handle, from which a sharply sharpened bladed weapon jumped out. Bright December relayed the monk's words that he was no longer interested in an old man like Police Chief Zhang. The killer put the tip of his weapon to the chest of the future general, and he asked for mercy. He didn't want to die in such a place and in such an inglorious way. Bright December asked Mr. Hongjong for something. He took off his mask and asked the officer to promise him something. A Bright December promised to save his life, and for this he must catch this bastard and give him 3 life sentences. This freak must pay for everything. Zhang was then very surprised and asked the young man why he needed this. Weren't they from the same clan? And Bright December asked the police chief if he liked monks. He put his mask back on and declared that he hated them. These are just bald downs. Bright December reminded the general that he had made a promise to him that night, but it seemed he had not kept it. He looked carefully at Senior General Zhang again. Bright December looked meaningfully at the officer's shoulder straps and said that it looked like he had been promoted significantly in 3 years. He was probably more interested in his own advancement than in fulfilling his promise. The killer put his hand in his pocket and said that this was a bad act on the part of the general. Bright December was determined to punish him for this with death. Zhang recoiled from him in fear and exclaimed that it was not that he did not want to, he simply could not. He asked Bright December why he thought he had promoted himself, and that it was much easier to gather information from the top. With this information, he can keep his word. The general recounted how he approached the leadership with information about a clan of assassins in the temple. He provided them with everything he had managed to collect. However, when the authorities heard that the monk was the head of a clan of assassins, they lost all interest in his information. No matter how he tried to prove the monk's involvement in the murders, they didn't want to listen to him. They accused him of reading too many comic books and that the Huaguksa temple is a national cultural treasure. He tried to prove that an entire department had conducted an investigation and found a lot of evidence, but he was rudely interrupted. He was very annoyed and hurt, but he couldn't do anything. He was officially warned that if he did not stop this, he would be fired. He was made to understand that the direction of this investigation was a taboo subject. Zhang was advised not to get involved in religion. After this, the investigation was stopped. Bright December asked the general if the investigation was stopped, not by him, but by the leadership, and Zhang confirmed this. He threw several case files on the table in front of the young man and asked him to take a look at how his team had worked tirelessly to get this. Bright December read these documents with interest. He threw the folders on the table and said that such a chaotic investigation, of course, should have been suspended. To which the general stated that there was still valuable information here. Bright December leaned back in his chair and said that was fine, as long as he kept Zhang alive. He noticed how the senior general sighed with relief. Bright December looked predatorily into the officer's eyes and reminded him that he would let him live for now. After that, they talked for some time in the silence of the office. Bright December finally told the general that he would help him not to die at his own hands. He saluted the senior general and expressed the hope that they would get along. Zhang looked into the eyes of his old acquaintance with hope and relief. The workday has just begun at the Ilsan police station. The officers on duty began their duties, monitoring the entrance and answering calls from citizens. Suddenly, the front door opened sharply. The guards on duty stood up from their seats in surprise. Kim literally burst into the department and greeted them. He wished them good morning, which surprised them greatly. The officers on duty rushed to the policeman and asked if he hadn't been fired yet. Chief Ha ran out of his office at the noise. He also seemed very surprised. Kim's presence at the station caused this genuine surprise. Ha turned to Kim indignantly and asked him if he hadn't told him not to come back here again. And the policeman calmly asked where the senior officers were, to which he was told that they were on sick leave. The boss firmly ordered Kim to get out of there. However, he did not move from his place, watching his boss carefully. No one could understand the logic of Kim's behavior. Suddenly, Chief Ha's face took on a servile expression, and he looked fearfully behind Kim. Everyone saw General Zhang enter the station. All the policemen greeted the senior officer, and the chief asked Zhang what brought him here. The general put his hand on Kim's shoulder and replied that he had come to see where their Kim was working. The chief was so surprised that the senior officer knew Kim that he almost fainted. The staff were also incredibly surprised by this. Zhang, meanwhile, patted Kim on the head and said that he could be said to be his savior. Kim saluted, and the general asked his superior to take good care of Kim. Then Hong Jun and Kim met on the street, and Kim told the general that it must be great to have a high rank. Zhang took a drag on his cigarette and looked at Kim carefully, and he asked him to do one more favor. Although the night was quite dark, the temple was well lit by external lanterns. Inside, a monk was kneeling before a statue of Buddha performing a ritual. His ears caught some movement behind him. Without turning his head, he asked, "Who was there?" The man who appeared in the doorway replied that he was the one who does not forgive insults. The bodhisattva looked around in surprise. He saw a man in a mask who added that he was a departed soul. The monk instantly grabbed the candles, sharpened at one end, and threw them with force towards the stranger. The flight of this original weapon was swift. The man who called himself a departed soul also reacted instantly. At the last moment, he dodged the terrible projectiles. They hit the door with a dull thud. The masked man calmly pulled them out with one hand and turned to the monk. He said that a true monk should not defame the abode of Buddha. The bodhisattva asked him who he was, and the young man reminded him that he had already said that he was a departed soul. The monk casually pointed his finger at him and asked again if he really was a departed soul. Their eyes met, and the stranger felt the room filling with people. These were the fighters of the bodhisattva, who wished the stranger a happy journey to heaven. The bandits rushed at the masked man. He waited calmly, looking at the monk's armed fighters. The bodhisattva, with his arms folded across his chest, watched the actions of his subordinates. A bandit armed with a knife tried to stab the uninvited guest. However, the masked man deftly dodged and delivered a monstrous blow to the opponent's stomach. The knife fell from the hands of the killer, who lost consciousness. The weapon spun into the air. The knife was picked up by a masked man, ready to fight armed. The battle was uncompromising and bloody. One of Bodhisattva's fighters attacked the enemy with a battle axe. He put all his hatred and strength into the blow. But disappointment awaited him too. The axe whistled uselessly through the air, without causing any harm to the man in the mask. He continued to destroy his opponents, methodically sending the most notorious scoundrels to the next world. The bandits seemed a little confused, since a lot of their comrades were already dead. Now only 2 surviving guards were able to protect the bodhisattva. The monk looked at the man in the mask with surprise and tension. This guy was very determined. Something in his appearance and posture reminded me of Bodhisattva. He raised his hand and ordered everyone to stop. His gaze carefully studied the man who had come to kill him. Kim thought that this was to be expected. He couldn't record anything because of the plugs that May had installed. Kim lowered the knife and asked the monk what they would do next. It seemed there were still many souls waiting to be at peace. The monk looked at the corpses of his subordinates with indifference. Kim picked up the knife and asked the monk, "Does that mean they will all turn into ghosts like him?" The bodhisattva repeated his order for everyone to remain in their places. He said he didn't know who sent this guy, but it seemed like someone was dealing with evil spirits, as evidenced by the mask on the stranger's face. The bodhisattva told the boy to come closer to him. He wanted to look at his face. Kim replied that there was no need to do that. He just dropped by to say hello to him. He will soon find out who he is anyway. But for now, the monk can prepare his head for execution. The monk rushed towards Kim with incredible speed to rip off his mask. He managed to reach her. But then there was a loud bang and the room was filled with fog. Everyone present realized that it was tear gas. The guards asked the monk with concern if he was okay. The bodhisattva, holding the torn-off mask in one hand, declared that they should not worry. He looked towards the entrance with regret and longing. Then the monk looked at the mask of his guest. Then, in anger and fury, he broke it in his hands. He looked around the temple room with annoyance, with its dead like-minded people and extinguished candles. His eyes were filled with incredible melancholy. The bodhisattva cast a regretful glance at his favorite icon and thought that his night visitor really did look like a ghost. The city was incredibly green and fresh that morning. Hong Jong, dressed in civilian clothes, walked slowly into the park. Kim, who was waiting for him, told the general that they had not seen him for only one day, but he seemed to have aged 10 years, and Jong exclaimed that it was all because of him, and he did not even imagine how many problems he now had. The assault on police officers, the noise, and, in addition, the tear gas has disappeared. The general asked Kim with annoyance if he realized how hard it would be for him to cover all this up, and the policeman replied that if they had caught this freak earlier, none of this would have happened. Jong asked the young man emotionally, "Does he really think it's that easy to do? They have evidence anyway. So by teaming up with the prosecutors, they just need to catch the bad guy. What's the point of all this trouble?" However, how could the killer know all about this? Kim replied that he didn't just kill people, he only killed those who were supposed to die. And the proof of this is his, the general's, life. Jong turned to Bright December with a serious expression. He said that no man has the power to decide who is destined to die and who is worthy of life, and all people should be judged according to the laws accepted in society. Kim suggested that the idiot would then be given a suspended sentence. The general replied that even if they were unable to catch 10 criminals, they could not commit even one miscarriage of justice. So they need hard evidence, and Kim cursed dirty about this damn evidence. He said he felt stuffy and would like to create his own department. The general exclaimed that Kim was an officer, and technically not a real one. What department was he even talking about? To which the young man replied that he was stronger than the others, and Zhang told him that this was not right. After all, there is a certain hierarchy in the police system. Kim asked how high up the ladder one would have to go to create their own team. Zhang replied that he needed to get a small mugunghwa. Kim thoughtfully replied that then he would have to get to work quickly and work hard to get a promotion as early as possible. The general advised him to sit quietly until they sorted everything out, otherwise he would get into trouble. Joe looked up and realized that Kim was no longer there. Kim headed to the Ilsan Police Department. He asked Chu what he needed to do to get promoted. She replied that of course it was necessary to undergo a check and ordered policeman Su to deal with the madam who was at the station. Meanwhile, Chu turned to Kim and said that she thought that his memory had returned, but he did not remember even basic things, to which Kim asked the girl when he would undergo testing. The drunk girl began to pester Kim when Chu told him that he had to serve for at least a year to pass the test. Kim kicked away a drunk girl who was complaining about the police service and asked Chu if he could get the test done faster. Chu asked him where he was going in such a hurry, whether he wanted to get a star, and the young man replied that it would be great. Chu told Kim to come to his senses because for an ordinary officer to obtain a mugunghwa, he had to work for at least 10 years. Kim asked her if this even concerned a senior general. Chu said the rank promotion test was just a formality. Kim asked if there were other ways to advance, and the girl replied that there were. This is a special promotion. Chu said that if he could catch serious criminals and show good results, he might get a special promotion. But they don't have that much time, so they just do what they're told and have to deal with the usual complaints. Although perhaps they too will be able to rise someday. You noticed that Kim had suddenly disappeared somewhere, and the boss was just interested in him. Nobody could figure out where he had gone. Meanwhile, the city's nightlife has begun. Prostitution, fights, brawls, drug and illicit drug trafficking. Kim, walking along the streets brightly lit by advertisements, wondered why a police officer was preparing for some kind of tests. After all, his main task is to catch criminals. You just have to work hard. The city is full of problem areas. You need to work hard and get a special promotion. All people in the country can be divided into three types. These three types have their own characteristics. One of them is former scammers. Of course, there are people who have broken the law in minor ways. But in any case, there are too many of them. Kim, wearing a civilian jacket with a hood over his police uniform, was among these people. But Bright December was not looking for petty offenders among them. He was only interested in criminal matters, something much more serious than jaywalking. His gaze fell on a card with a picture of a leaf that was circulating among the club's public like a banknote. This was exactly what Bright December was looking for. This was a criminal offense in its purest form. The lights in the club were brightly lit, but the disc jockey stopped the music. The audience wanted to know why the music suddenly stopped, and the jockey addressed everyone with a speech. He asked the young people why they were dancing sluggishly. Had they not yet recovered from the previous evening? The girls came up to the stage and said they wanted some champagne. They thought that even one bottle would help them get going. The disc jockey asked the girls understandingly, "Does that mean they want to have a drinking party?" He told them to open their mouths wider. He then turned to the men, showing them a stack of cards with pictures of leaves on them, and asked if they would like to use the pain-relieving patch. He then handed 2 bottles of champagne to the girls, and he threw a whole pack of cards into the jubilant crowd. He suggested that everyone have a hot night. But then Bright December came out of the crowd and told the jockey that he was a natural humorist. He stared in bewilderment at the stranger in civilian clothes with a hood. Kim showed him a card, one of the ones the disc jockey had thrown into the crowd, and told him to expect hot prison stew. The jockey asked him what was the matter, if they weren't giving him any chicks. Then let him take this wonderful pain-relieving patch. But Bright December replied that he was fine without it. He picked up the patch clutched in his hand. Kim told the disc jockey that these were still regular drugs. He indignantly disagreed with the stranger and accused him of lying. He asked Bright December who he thought he was and why he was talking nonsense like it was any of his business. Kim slowly took off his outer clothing and remained in his police uniform, declaring that he was from the police. The drug dealer angrily asked his guards how the police cur had managed to get in there. An empty champagne bottle flew straight into the nose of one of the guards. Kim informed them that they would all now whisper behind bars. The drug dealer swore foully. He realized he had to escape and ordered the guards to jump off the stage. He ran quickly, escaping from the policeman. In the back room, he ordered his subordinates to immediately hide the goods and run away. He himself continued moving towards the black exit. Bright December pursued the criminals, taking out one by one the drug dealer's guards and accomplices. Kim was sure that the criminal could not escape from him. One of the guards accompanying the boss grabbed the handle of the back door, trying to open the door. The jockey asked him impatiently why he had stopped and was not opening the door. The door was blocked from the other side, and the people guarding the entrance were unconscious and groaning loudly, lying in front of the door. At this time, the drug dealer and his 2 guards were called out by Bright December, who had caught up with them. He asked the bandits if they had decided to play tag with him. Then it dawned on the drug dealer that this guy had come alone. Kim didn't refuse this and asked what was wrong with it. The jockey grinned and said that it looked like he had put on his pants because of some lone mongrel, because he thought that a whole pack would come running with him. He turned to his guards, who were ready to carry out any of his orders. The guards pulled out red cards with a picture of a leaf from their pockets. It was a particularly strong drug. The guards stuck these cards on their necks. This made their faces distort and take on a sinister appearance. It was as if animal fury and strength had flowed into their bodies. Bright December was surprised by the incredibly effective action of this drug, and the drug dealer, turning to Kim, said that he would make good mincemeat. The drugged guards went on the attack, but the first one immediately ran into a powerful blow from a policeman. The guard flew back a few meters and the second looked warily at Bright December. Kim told him, looking at the blood flying out of his colleague's mouth, that it was better to keep your mouth shut at times like these. The first guard growled loudly, holding his bitten-off tongue in his hands. Kim nodded in satisfaction and said that he shouldn't keep the pain to himself. The drug dealer was shaking like an aspen leaf. He sat down on the floor out of fear. He stuttered as he turned to the police officer. The jockey suggested that Kim talk like civilized people and offered his help. Kim asked him if he could give him what he wanted. The dealer replied that he could give him as much money, girls, and drugs as he needed. Kim slowly said that he needed a special promotion. The policeman grabbed the drug dealer by the hair and said that he only wanted a special promotion. On the morning news, the TV announcer reported that a drug lord was arrested in a club in Ilsan last night. She reported that the country's residents are concerned about the availability of drugs. The general praised Kim for doing a good job. He was promoted to the rank of corporal, and the officer thanked his superior for this. However, the general immediately shouted at him, reproaching him for the fact that no officer dares to quit his job and do whatever he wants. Kim asked the general not to make a fuss, but rather to take a look at something. A green sheet of paper folded in four appeared on the general's desk. Kim said that these were drugs from the crime scene, and they were probably hiding them in the safe. The general asked Kim if he had stolen the evidence. Kim said November's name and, unfolding the sheet, asked the general if it reminded him of anything. The general looked carefully at the evidence indicated. He recognized the red card and exclaimed the name of the goddess Phoenix. October, beaten and humiliated, was on his knees, with two red cards taped to his chest. He said that Ilsan was under his control, but he was not guilty of anything. Phoenix turned to her henchmen, who were standing there wearing masks. She ordered another patch to be put on October's chest. The man begged the goddess Phoenix not to do this, but she was amused by the way October's body was swelling under the influence of this drug. Finally, blood began to flow from his mouth. The goddess ordered her minions to remove him. She said with satisfaction that Bright December was dead and October was punished. She said she hated punishing, but she will have to do it. She'll have to deal with these fucking police. Kim looked the general in the eye and said that this was November Phoenix, better known as Bright Trash, and she was a dirty, dependent bitch. Bright December thought that training in another body is not so bad. The previous owner was in good shape. Muscles, strength, flexibility, endurance. It was all there. This body maintains balance in everything. But to get rid of the Bodhisattva and his gang, this is not enough. It is not enough to wipe them off the face of the earth. Bright December leaned his hand on the table and looked at the photo of Kim, the boy he had been reborn into. Bright December lay down on the floor and spread his arms out to the sides. He understood perfectly well that all this was too little and he still needed time. At the station, his colleagues became obsequious to him, and Chu, seizing the moment, asked Kim if he could find an extra minute for them. Kim turned in his chair and looked at his comrades. He asked them, "What's the matter?" They went out into the gazebo, and Kim listened carefully to what his colleagues wanted to tell him. They wanted to get promoted too. They asked Kim to help them with this. He asked the police why they had approached him in particular. They admitted that he was the boss and had recently been promoted. Kim's colleagues told him that if he ever needed help, he could call them at any time and they would be happy to work as hard as they could. Kim looked closely at his colleagues and decided that they were just like children. He asked why he needed their help. Chu took a step forward and said that they had always been on his side. Didn't he remember that? And Kim replied that he didn't remember anything at all due to memory loss. The girl assured him that this was true. They had endured abuse together, and they had visited him in the hospital. They had done everything for him. The others also tried to remember what other help they had given to policeman Kim. Sue asked Kim, "And in general, aren't they comrades?" He even placed his hand on Kim's shoulder in a friendly manner. Bright December remembered a rainy day when he stood outside with an open umbrella. There was a mask on his face, and in front of him stood two people who knew that he was Bright December, a killer who chooses his own victim. And they thought that was just some kind of madness. They asked him why he was considered the best among them. They admitted that they didn't even want to see him. They stood there in the rain with their umbrellas open. The girl, over whom two big men were holding two umbrellas, said that the Bodhisattva loved only his brother December. Because of this, she is simply choking with envy. Why don't they just get rid of him? She repeated the word comrades again, interrupting Kim's sad memories. Kim looked sadly at these comrades and said that they were real children. He emotionally told them that they were not comrades at all and that they should get promoted first. Where had they seen ordinary patrolmen call a corporal with 2 stars their comrade? Chu freaked out and called him an idiot, urging Kim to forget about his situation and fight her. Suddenly, they heard the angry voice of the boss, who asked them what they were doing here. Everyone turned their heads at once towards the source of the sound. Chief Ha indignantly asked the policemen why they were lounging around here. He asked them if they had finished their work already. Chu replied that they were just taking a short break, but these words did not calm the boss. He rudely stated that he didn't like any of them, and that they were all worthless idiots. Then he approached Kim with a smile and, addressing him, affectionately said an amazing phrase. The chief said his words did not apply to Kim. On the contrary, the chief called him the star of their department and a lucky guy, and also asked if he had been injured during the operation, to which Kim replied that his shoulder hurt a little. The boss gently massaged his hand and advised him not to overexert himself. The police officers thought with hostility that the chief was hoping for a promotion thanks to Kim, which is why he was bending over backwards. Chu looked at her boss with curiosity. At this time, 2 people came out of the hospital who looked like brothers. Jung exclaimed that it would be better if this Kim didn't exist at all. Min advised his brother not to be angry, because after being discharged from the hospital it was better not to strain himself too much, and Jong asked him if he wasn't angry. After all, Kim received the rank of senior corporal, and this sounds like nonsense. Min replied that in the last few days everything in the department has been revolving around this idiot. Chan said he wouldn't believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. At that moment, a girl appeared next to them with a bag of cookies in her hands. She turned to the police and asked them to show her the way. Min replied that they themselves did not know anything and advised her to look at the route on her phone. Then he turned to his brother and advised him to look at this girl. Chan looked back and took in the girl's well-proportioned figure. She was very attractive. The girl smiled sweetly at the police and said that her battery was dead. Min noticed that Chan was already overexcited and advised him not to do this. Otherwise, he might end up back in the hospital like this. The girl approached them and asked for help. Chan agreed to help her and asked where she was going. She said she was looking for directions to the Ilsan police station. Chan happily exclaimed that they were working there and could see her off. The girl was delighted and expressed a desire to go with them. She then asked the police if they knew of an officer named Kim. Min replied that they knew each other because this officer was replacing them and asked what the girl wanted from him. She replied worriedly that she needed to give him something, and if she lost it, he would be very angry. Min smiled and said that they thought she was dating Kim, and Jong added that they almost changed their minds about helping her because of that. The girl handed them the livers and said that she was giving them to them as a token of gratitude and that they could eat them if they got hungry along the way. The police officers accepted this gift with gratitude. The general reviewed the records concerning the girl November, nicknamed Phoenix. According to data collected by Bright December, she is responsible for all financial crimes in China. They deal with drugs, and these drugs are divided according to their strength. They are called Buddha's tears. And since all criminals fear the punishment of the Bodhisattva, drugs are used by the top brass of the Huaguksa clan. The police officers on duty at the station saw a girl enter the premises. She casually snacked on the liver she took out of the bag. Exactly the same liver was already lying next to the police station building, right on the sidewalk. Nearby, in uncomfortable positions, lay the dead Min and Chan. The girl slowly ate her liver and sighed. She slowly walked up to the police officers behind the counter. Meanwhile, the general, studying the November case, exclaimed that this was a real cur. Kim looked closely at the girl and said the same words that the general had said in his office. The girl pointed her index finger at Kim and exclaimed that she had found the corporal. The girl, clutching the bag of livers to her chest, looked intently into Kim's eyes. The corporal recognized her. Chu asked the girl if she had lost something or if she needed help. Without taking her eyes off Kim, she said that she needed paulownia leaves. Chu looked at the girl in bewilderment, not understanding what she wanted. The girl explained that she needed paulownia flowers wrapped in leaves. Chu asked Su if anything similar had come to them, and he promised to check immediately. A strange girl stopped a policeman and said that there was no need to check anything. She pointed at Kim again and stated that they were with this officer. Chu couldn't understand what this woman was talking about, and Bright December thought that this girl hadn't changed at all. He had no idea what could be going on in her head and pressed the button on his phone to call for help, but the calls were blocked. Kim noticed that the surveillance cameras in the station had stopped working, and Chu asked him why he wasn't answering the visitor. Bright December stared into the girl's eyes and thought about how it all began. In his hands was a training wooden sword. This girl attacked him with fury in her eyes. Bright December barely repelled her strong blow. The sword blade passed just a few centimeters from his head. He had to work at full capacity. He managed to deliver a precise and powerful counterattack that shocked the girl. She lay at his feet, and he pointed his training weapon at her. The Bodhisattva asked Bi Quan what he thought about this. Did he find anyone else who was even a little bit worthwhile? He looked at the defeated opponents lying on the ground and replied that no one was coming. The monk nodded his head and stated that he thought so. It was raining heavily, and the girl kneeling before him was very wet and therefore shivering. The monk looked at all the candidates and ordered Bi Quan to send them all to heaven. They must see Buddha. Future Bright December told him that if they were trained a little, they would be able to work normally. They will be able to serve him with dignity. The Bodhisattva told him with a smile that he had already advised him to suppress the feeling of pity in himself. The young man looked at the guards who were giving the defeated candidates drinks from cups filled with the drug. Bai Quan soon heard screams and groans that clearly indicated the fate of these unfortunate losers. Then he heard the voice of the girl who addressed the monk. Leaning on her wooden sword, she told him that she could still fight. She vowed that she would train hard and be of use to him. The Bodhisattva looked at her with interest and asked, "Does that mean she really wants to be useful to him?" The monk extended his hand to her and declared that it would be better for her to die and come to him again in a new life. The girl begged the bodhisattva not to kill her. However, Bi Quan saw two guards force her to drink the drug from a cup. They just forced this nasty stuff into her mouth. Before leaving for his temple, the bodhisattva addressed his assistants. He ordered that order be restored and the bodies disposed of. Bright December saw two guards approach the girl. One of them turned to the monk and declared that the child was still breathing. The bodhisattva thought for a second. He looked at the girl's face with interest and ordered her to be taken with him. In the temple, he pointed to a table where the girl had many plates with different types of drugs and told her to empty all of these plates in 1 month. The bodhisattva promised the girl to make her his assistant if she carried out his order. The girl agreed, and from then on things became more and more tolerant. When she grew up, the monk called her to him. He solemnly informed her that she was now November, nicknamed Phoenix. November gratefully took the mask he handed her from his hands and promised that she would never let him down. Kim looked again into the eyes of this unfortunate girl who now stood before him at the police station. He thought about how she had become a drug-addicted cur at that very moment, and November asked him in the meantime, did he really not want to answer her? She came close to Kim and asked him where her shit was. She demanded an answer, and Kim thought there were too many prying eyes around. Kim replied that he had her drug. He is at his home. Kim asked the girl if she wanted to be his guest, deciding that she needed to be lured out into the street and killed there. He invited November to go with him to his home, and Sue warned the corporal that this was not the case. Meanwhile, November called Kim a liar. She confidently stated that her brother would never keep drugs in his house. The police officers present at the scene stared at her in surprise. The girl, meanwhile, aggressively asked Kim if he really thought she would fall for his trick. She quickly thrust her hand into the bag she was holding. She pulled out a pack of drug-covered Velcro cards and threw them towards the police. Every police officer present received a sticker on his face, and only Kim managed to dodge it. He heard the groans of his colleagues who were under the influence of the drug. They all fell unconscious to the floor. The police officers were still unconscious in the chairs where they had been placed by Phoenix's two burly accomplices. Phoenix asked Kim if he would let them die, because if they were not helped, they would die soon. November showed a special sticky tape that was an antidote, and told Kim that if he told her where her drugs were, she would help his colleagues. The policeman quickly rushed towards the girl. He tore her shirt open at her chest, and November looked at Kim in confusion. He showed her the plug that had been torn from her body, and then he demonstratively crushed it with 2 fingers and said that it was no more. November looked down at her torn clothes with resignation. Meanwhile, Kim called for backup. Then he told the girl that there was no one around, and these were ideal conditions for murder. November asked the policeman in fear what he was talking about. Bright December replied that she would understand everything when he beat the crap out of her. He expressed hope that she would remember the good old days. Kim was clutching a baton in his right hand and was slowly approaching the girl. November looked reproachfully at the policeman and noticed that he was using rude words towards her and even decided to raise his hand to the girl. In addition, he tore her clothes. Phoenix asked Kim if he really enjoyed treating women so cruelly. Instead of answering, he swung his club and November deftly ducked under his arm. But Kim figured out her maneuver and the blow with the baton reached its target. The girl dropped her bag and took 1 step back. She sank into a chair and, with a grimace on her face, pressed her palm to the wound on her forehead. Looking at her palm, she noticed blood on her fingers. The girl's face was distorted by an evil grimace, and she called the officer a cur, promising to kill him. Kim calmly said that she was still just as ugly when she was angry. Bright December and Phoenix stood opposite each other, ready to fight. November said thoughtfully that Kim surprised her, and obviously he wasn't just a cop. The officer advised the girl not to keep her anger to herself. She asked with interest where he was from some special unit, and Kim shrugged and asked her what she thought. At that moment, Phoenix pulled out a red card from the folds of her clothes and stated, sticking it to her neck, that she didn't care about his previous job. Kim noticed that her actions were simply disgusting to him. The girl apparently has already experienced the effects of this patch. She became even more aggressive and told the policeman that she believed he would find a suitable position for himself in hell. Bright December was ready for any outcome of their duel. Meanwhile, Phoenix quickly rushed into attack. Kim calmly waited for her approach. He hit the girl in the face with his baton and asked if she really thought 1 bandage was enough for her. Phoenix, having received a powerful blow to the face, fell to the floor. Kim added that she needed at least 10 of these patches. Otherwise, she won't be able to resist him. Phoenix wasn't going to give up so easily. She got up and launched another attack, which was blocked by Kim. The girl was very upset and angry. Bright December, meanwhile, declared that she had not changed at all. Does she still rely on drugs and not pay enough attention to training? Although now he can only thank her for it. Phoenix exclaimed with fury. Who did he think he was to think he knew her? Kim smiled and said that no one could say that. But who does she think he is? He looked the girl intently in the eyes. Phoenix rushed at the policeman again with redoubled energy. However, she was immediately knocked to the floor by Kim. He put the police baton to her chest and the girl's eyes widened in fear. The officer, meanwhile, told her that, being on the verge of death from mutilation, she should guess who he was. Phoenix couldn't understand what kind of nonsense this policeman was talking about, and Kim noticed that her brain was obviously already leaking from the drugs. Kim brought the club down hard on the girl's chest. He expressed hope that she would remember him at least before her death. Kim pressed hard on the baton, trying to finish off Phoenix. Their faces were in close proximity to each other. November, nicknamed Phoenix, screamed loudly. However, at the last moment the police baton broke and the girl managed to hit the policeman. Freed, Phoenix breathed heavily, coming to her senses. Kim stood next to her and cursed the broken baton for its poor quality. He now understood why the police were fighting like idiots. After catching her breath, Phoenix attacked Kim again. The policeman went into deep defense. He looked at the girl's forehead with surprise. There was a new type of plaster stuck on there. Bright December had never seen such patches before. It was some new drug. Kim looked at his hands, which showed the telltale signs of drug use. It affected him even through touching his clothes. It wasn't very good. Phoenix asked Kim with irritation, "Who the hell is he?" She looked intently at the officer. This guy reminded her of someone, and at that moment her accomplice ran into the room and addressed Miss Phoenix. He reported that Mr. Orchid had contacted them and said that help was almost on its way. Kim told Phoenix that she could get out of there because he would feel sorry for her today, but he hopes that they will see her again. Kim thought, looking at the girl, that it was obvious the police wouldn't chase her. They would die if they tried. Phoenix turned around and walked towards the exit, and her accomplice asked the girl what was wrong with her face. November looked very thoughtful at this moment. She asked herself in a whisper, why did this cop remind her of someone from the past named B. Kwan? After some time, several police cars and ambulances were parked at the entrance to the police station, and medics were providing assistance to the injured police officers. General Zhang asked Kim with annoyance, had he really missed them? Instead of answering, the policeman threw a broken baton at the senior general. Kim emotionally said that this would not have happened if he had been given normal equipment and why the baton breaks from the slightest pressure. To which Zhang replied that normal batons should not be strong because they are not used like that. Kim showed the general his drug-affected hands and said he could not feel them. Zhang immediately ordered a doctor to be called, and Kim thought that the outcome was unpredictable, but he was lucky that Phoenix was scared. While the doctor was treating Kim, he thought that the patch worked through contact with clothing and that it might be some new drug. Bright December thought about Phoenix and decided that she would soon become a walking drug herself, and he expected everything to go smoothly. But it seems that it will not be so simple. He approached the senior general and asked him for a favor. At night, Kim went to a place known to him. He secretly entered a certain door. Then he quietly opened it and entered the room where they were already waiting for him. The room filled with smoke. Phoenix's henchmen decided that Kim had been caught because they had used a drug that caused hallucinations and death. Miss Phoenix asked them to increase the dose to the maximum, and maybe this guy will see something more than hallucinations and die from an overdose. Kim asked the senior general for some equipment. He knew they would be waiting for him, so he asked for good equipment, the best that was available. Kim appeared before the bandits in a special protective suit and said that Phoenix was even afraid to come in person. She is a real cowardly cat. But he didn't give a damn, and now intends to try out his new weapon. Kim pointed his gun at a couple of Phoenix fighters wearing strange cock masks. One of them exclaimed that the policeman had a gun, and the second calmed him down, saying that the gun was unlikely to be loaded. As if in response to his words, the machine gun in Kim's hands began to shake, and he opened fire to kill. The people in rooster masks fell nearby, their heads burying themselves in the door. Kim stopped firing and muttered, looking at the fallen enemies, that this gun wasn't so bad at all. When the police arrived at the scene, people came out of neighboring apartments and wanted to know what was going on, but the police asked them to return home. They told worried residents that they were already investigating the apartment where the shots were fired. The bandits, still not having recovered from being wounded by rubber bullets, sat on the floor of the apartment with their hands and feet tied. General Zhang asked Kim how many times he had shot at those men in cock masks, and he replied that the bandits had gotten what they deserved. Kim added to Jong that they might wake up during transport and the pills under their tongues needed to be removed. The general looked into the policeman's eyes and asked if he really was Biquan. Kim asked in surprise. If he had doubted all this time, then how did he manage to give him the equipment? The general replied that he had no other choice. How could anyone in their right mind believe such a thing? But after the incident with drugs in Phoenix, and after that, he changed his mind. He was almost 99% sure that he was Bi Kwang, and Kim asked why he wasn't 100% sure. General Zhang replied that he removed the percentage because he thought of something. If he really is Bi Kwang, then why hasn't he killed the monk yet? Kim replied that he himself said that hard evidence was needed, but how can a police officer say that? Zhang agreed with Kim, adding that this was true from the police officer's point of view, but not from the other's point of view. Monk Yunhua. Buddha is respected by the whole country, and people perceive him as the reincarnation of Buddha. If this bastard dies, what will the public say? Kim added that killing would not solve the problem, as those backwaters were much larger than the general imagined. Zhang asked Kim if there were any other organizations besides the Huiguksa clan, to which the policeman replied that he was not interested in others. He just wants to bring this bastard down by any means necessary. He wants to make sure that no one else falls into his dirty hands. The general extended his hand and promised to help Kim. They would work together to put this idiot behind bars. Kim didn't move and turned sharply to Zhang, asking what he meant by the word help. It was he who was helping him not to die at his own hands. Kim ordered the general to listen to him if he did not want to die. The policeman also said that it was not that he did not try to kill the monk. He just couldn't do it. Who does the general think taught him everything he knows? Meanwhile, Buddha held his assistant Phoenix tightly by the throat. The girl begged the monk to spare her. The monk called her a dirty rag and said that her brain was bleeding from excessive drug use. He threw her roughly to the floor and asked why she had broken into the police station when all her goods had been confiscated. The monk decided that it was time to teach her a lesson. Phoenix, with tears in her eyes, begged the bodhisattva not to kill her, and admitted that she was wrong. Two subjects appeared in the room and burst out laughing, one of them saying that it looked like an innocent child was crying, although she had gone even lower, becoming a drug-addicted scumbag. The second man in the mask advised Phoenix not to cry because stress burns up muscle mass, and without it, she is completely defenseless. It was two thugs, the Lespedeza brothers, and Phoenix asked in fear, "What are these idiots doing here?" A girl with a fan in her hands asked her if she thought that Lord Buddha had called them. Phoenix recognized the girl as Cherry Blossom, and the monk said with satisfaction that everything was now in place. The monk looked sternly at everyone gathered and said that he declared the matter of eliminating November to have begun. November turned to Buddha and promised to return everything that was lost. She begged him to forgive her. Buddha took a small box out of the desk drawer and, opening it, told Phoenix that he had already returned everything. The girl was surprised to see drugs wrapped in leaves inside the box and asked how he could do this, and the monk turned to the Lespedeza brothers and asked them what they thought about this. The question was addressed to the April Black Lespedeza, July Lespedeza, and March Cherry Blossom. July. Lespedeza expressed his opinion that this drug-addicted cur should be gotten rid of, and his brother April Black. Lespedeza confirmed that she uses drugs to become stronger and nothing could be more disgusting in the world. And Cherry Blossom said that over all these years, she and Phoenix have become very close. But you have to be the best to survive in this cold and cruel world. The monk nodded his head in satisfaction and said that the majority had voted to punish November. Phoenix burst into tears and exclaimed that this was too cruel to her. She accused the monk of deliberately bringing bastards who were against her, and Cherry Blossom realized how this girl felt about her. She obsequiously offered the revolver to Buddha. The monk pointed his gun at Phoenix and declared that he had no need for useless assistance. Suddenly, Phoenix lowered her head and exclaimed that she had invented a new drug. It is 5 times stronger than the previous ones, and she developed it herself, so they are unlikely to be tested. The monk lowered the gun and asked the girl how much of the drug she had managed to make, and she replied that it was about 10 kilograms. The bodhisattva inquired about the delivery, and Phoenix replied that she had examined and connected all the routes, all the red light districts of Korea, Japan, China, and other South Asian countries. November looked imploringly at Buddha and asked him to give her another 6 months, and then she would be useful to him. The monk gave her half the time she asked for, explaining that he had already lost too much because of her tricks. But if she proved that she deserved to live, he would give her this opportunity. Hope and joy appeared on Phoenix's face. At this time, Kim went to the hospital to preach to his colleagues and saw a completely helpless Chu in the ward, who was still under the influence of drugs. She couldn't even speak or perform basic actions on her own. Sue turned to Kim and said that he was surprised that he had come, but he understood that they were colleagues. The policeman replied that they had visited him when he was in the hospital, which is why he had come to them. His colleagues asked him if he was getting a special promotion again, but Kim replied that he hadn't heard anything about it himself. After this, Kim said goodbye to his colleagues and advised them to pull themselves together. As the door slammed behind the policeman, Sue expressed the opinion that Kim had changed a lot. The general said thoughtfully that he believed that there was a parasite in the department. He sat opposite Kim in his office and added that he wanted to check the drugs he had brought him, and so he sent them for testing. But unfortunately, they were missing. Someone had stolen them. Could he guess who it could be? Kim replied with displeasure that he didn't know. He couldn't know everything about the police system, and the drugs were their main evidence, and he would now get more cover as soon as he caught this cur. Kim advised the general to handle internal matters on his own and obtain information from Phoenix's subordinates, to which Jong replied that they were still interrogating the prisoners. Kim then asked the general when he intended to involve the special squad he had spoken of in the investigation of the Hwaguksa clan. The general became sad and said that, in fact, they were all now dead and there was no one left. Kim pounced on Jun, accusing him of lying. He punched the general in the jaw, and the general asked the policeman why he didn't create a new squad himself. Kim said with bewilderment that he himself said that at least one Muhunhwa is needed to create his own team. The general objected and said that he had 2 stars, and no one would object. Kim tugged at the general's tie and said he was against it because he liked to work alone. Jung reminded Kim that he himself had said that he needed a team, and the policeman countered that he had said that because they had messed up. The general, with a serious expression on his face, told Kim that the police were a complex organization and he could only work alone for so long, but it would be easier for him with a team since he would receive more funding and it would be easier for him to report. He added that it was his order as superintendent for Kim to form a team. He can't create his own because he is under too much surveillance and it creates too many risks. Kim replied that he didn't like orders and it would be better if you asked him politely, then he would fulfill this request. The general gently asked Kim to form a team. At the hospital, his colleagues were very surprised that Kim was going to create his own team. They could not believe that a corporal could form his own squad, to which Kim replied that he was ordered to do so. Chu mumbled something unintelligible and Sue translated it, telling Kim that the girl was asking who would be on the team. Kim replied that the team would, of course, include the 3 of them, since they had no one else suitable in their department except them. The colleagues were grateful to the corporal to the point of tears and promised to serve him faithfully and truly. Sue even hugged the policeman and said that it was good to have worthy colleagues, and Kim asked him with displeasure what colleagues meant. Had they really forgotten where their place was? Kim said he didn't need any assistance. He just needed an obedient crowd that would follow his every command. He made it clear to his subordinates that they were all his slaves, people who would die when he commanded and live as long as he allowed. And if everything is clear to them, then they can start calling him master. Based on the report that Kim Jun provided, it was possible to draw some conclusions about the future members of his squad. The policeman's name was Huang, and he was 25 years old. He has a background in boxing, kickboxing, taekwondo, and other martial arts, and according to available information, he is a good candidate. However, he failed the written exam 4 times and somehow ended up in the police station. The second guy, Sue, is also 25 years old. He is good at martial arts, which involves hand-to-hand combat or wrestling on the ground, jiu-jitsu and judo. His background is not that bad either. However, on the day of the interview, he suddenly burst into tears like a little child. And finally, Chu, a 25-year-old girl. She has no experience at all in any kind of sport and came in last place in the sports test, the weakest officer in the entire department. But she was the first to complete the written exam and took first place in the interview. In Kim's opinion, this girl is very smart, and besides, she really wanted to join the squad. After being discharged from the hospital, all 3 stood on the platform and looked at their master in bewilderment. Kim warmed up calmly in front of them. Huang asked Mr. Kim why he had gathered them here on a day off, and the corporal suggested that they begin their warm-up. He reminded his future team members that they were police officers, and he will play the role of a dangerous killer, and they have 5 minutes to prepare, after which they will all try to kill him at once. Huang asked Kim doubtfully if he would really fight alone against 3 people. And what if he got hurt? Kim calmly replied that they would begin the battle in exactly 4 minutes. The Trinity stepped aside and, sitting on the ground, began to quietly confer. Chu assumed that this idiot had completely lost his mind, and Sue reminded the girl that she herself had called for him to be called Lord. But Chu replied that the corporal still couldn't hear anything. Huang asked his comrades what they should do, since they had agreed to obey Kim's orders. Chu asked Huang to pretend that he was going to attack him, and Su should pin him to the ground. Huang asked the girl if he should just run at him, and Chu reminded him that he was a boxer and should use his skills. Meanwhile, Kim dropped his shirt, revealing his strong muscles, and asked his colleagues if they were ready for the fight. Chu told Huang to attack the corporal to deceive the enemy. Huang hesitantly took a few steps towards Kim. Then he suddenly stopped and began to jump in front of him. His comrades stared in amazement at his dance, and Chu ordered him to come closer. Just then, Huang received a brutal blow to the face that sent him flying back several meters. The comrades rushed to the motionless body of their friend, and Kim asked them in surprise if they were really joking. Chu asked Su to attack Kim. However, he ran away with a frightened expression on his face.